Ranking Member Rogers, thank you for the opportunity to be here with Secretary Austin and General McKenzie to discuss Afghanistan. During the past 20 years, the men and women of the United States military, along with our allies and partners, fought the Taliban, brought Osama bin Laden to justice, denied al-Qaeda sanctuary, and protected our homeland for 2 consecutive decades. Over 800,000 of us in uniform served in Afghanistan. Most importantly, 2,461 U.S. soldiers, sailors, airmen, and Marines paid the ultimate price. 20,698 were wounded in action, and countless others suffered the invisible wounds of war. There's no doubt in my mind that our efforts prevented an attack on the homeland from Afghanistan, which was our core mission. And everyone who ever served in that war in Afghanistan should be proud. Your service mattered. Beginning in 2011, we steadily drew down our troop numbers, consolidated and closed bases, and retrograded equipment from Afghanistan. At our peak in 2011, we had 97,000 U.S. troops alongside 41,000 NATO troops in Afghanistan. 10 years later, when Ambassador Khalilzad signed the Doha Agreement with Milley on 29 February 2020, the United States had 12,600 troops, with 8,000 NATO and 10,500 contractors in Afghanistan. This has been a 10-year multi-administration drawdown, not a 19-month retrograde or 17-day non-combatant evacuation operation. Under the Doha Agreement, the United States will begin to withdraw its forces contingent upon the Taliban meeting certain conditions, which would lead to a political agreement between the Taliban and the government of Afghanistan. There were 7 conditions applicable to the Taliban and 8 to the United States. While the Taliban did not attack the United States forces, which was one of the conditions, it failed to fully honor any other condition under the Doha Agreement. And perhaps most importantly for the United States national security, the Taliban has never renounced their linkages with al-Qaeda or broke their affiliation with them. We, the United States, adhered to every condition. In the fall of 2020, my analysis then was that an accelerated withdrawal without meeting specific and necessary conditions risks losing the substantial gains made in Afghanistan, would potentially damage U.S. worldwide credibility, and could precipitate a general collapse of the Afghan security forces and the Afghan government, resulting in a complete Taliban takeover or general civil war. That analysis was a year ago. Based on my advice and the advice of the commanders at the time, then Secretary of Defense Esper submitted a memorandum on 9 November, recommending that we maintain the U.S. forces, which were then at about 4,500 in Afghanistan, until conditions were met for further reductions. 2 days later, on 11 November, I received an unclassified signed order directing the United States military to withdraw all forces from Afghanistan by 15 January 2021. After further discussion regarding the risks associated with such a withdrawal, the order was rescinded. On 17 November, we received a new order to reduce troop levels to 2,500 plus enabling forces no later than 15 January. When President Biden was inaugurated, there were approximately 3,500 U.S. troops, 5,400 NATO, and 6,300 contractors in Afghanistan, tasked to train, advise, and assist a small contingent of counterterrorism forces. And the strategic situation was stalemate. The Biden administration, through the National Security Council process, conducted a rigorous interagency review of the situation in Afghanistan in February, March, and April. During this process, the views of all of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, all of us, the CENTCOM Commander, General McKenzie, U.S. 4A Commander, General Miller, and myself were all given serious consideration by the administration. We provided a broad range of options in our assessment of their potential outcomes. We couched that in cost, benefit, risk to force, risk to mission. All of that was evaluated against the national security objectives of the United States. On 14 April, the President of the United States, President Biden, announced his decision, and the U.S. military received a change of mission to retrograde all U.S. military forces maintain a small contingency force of 600 to 700 to protect the embassy in Kabul until the Department of State could coordinate contractor security support, and also to assist Turkey to maintain the Hamid Karzai International Airport and to transition the U.S. mission to over-the-horizon counterterrorism support and security force assistance. It is clear, it is obvious to all of us that the war in Afghanistan did not end on the terms that we wanted, with the Taliban now in power in Kabul. Although the NEO was unprecedented and is the largest air evacuation in history, it was a tactical, operational, and logistical success, evacuating 124,000 people. The war was a strategic failure. It came also at an incredible cost in the end, with 11 Marines, 1 soldier, and a Navy corpsman. These 13 gave their lives so that people they never met would have an opportunity to live in freedom. And we must remember that the Taliban was and remains a terrorist organization, and they still have not broken with al-Qaeda. I have no illusions who we are dealing with. It remains to be seen whether or not the Taliban can consolidate power or if the country will further fracture into civil war. But we must continue to protect the United States of America and its people from terrorist attacks from Afghanistan. A reconstituted al-Qaeda or ISIS with aspirations to attack the United States is a very real possibility. And those conditions, to include activity in ungoverned spaces, could present themselves in the next 12 to 36 months. That mission will be much harder now, but not impossible, and we will continue to protect the American people. Strategic decisions have strategic consequences. Over the course of 4 presidents, 12 secretaries of defense, 7 chairmen, 10 CENTCOM commanders, and 20 commanders in Afghanistan, and hundreds of congressional delegation visits and 20 years of congressional oversight, there are many lessons to be learned. Among those lessons is the unprecedented speed of the collapse of the ANSF. However, one lesson we can never forget is that every soldier, sailor, airman, and Marine who served there for 20 years protected our country against attack from terrorists. And for that, we all should be forever grateful, and those soldiers, sailors, airmen, and Marines should be forever proud. Mr. Chairman, with your permission, I'd like to address a couple of comments about my personal conduct that's been in the media lately.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, you may. Go ahead.
I've served this nation for 42 years. I've spent years in combat and buried a lot of my troops who died while defending this country. My loyalty to this nation, its people, and the Constitution hasn't changed and will never change as long as I have a breath to give. My loyalty to the Constitution and to this nation is absolute, and I will not turn my back on my fallen. With respect to the Chinese calls, I routinely communicated with my counterpart, General Lee, with the knowledge and coordination of civilian oversight. I am specifically directed to communicate with the Chinese by Department of Defense guidance in a document known as the Policy Dialogue System. These military-to-military communications at the highest levels are critical to the security of the United States in order to deconflict military actions, manage crisis, and prevent war between great powers armed with nuclear weapons. The calls on 30 October and 8 January were coordinated before and after with Secretary Esper and Acting Secretary Miller's staffs and the interagency. The specific purpose of the October and January calls was generated by concerning intelligence which caused us to believe the Chinese were worried about an attack by the United States. And last night I briefed that intelligence in detail to the Senate Armed Services Committee, and I'll be happy to brief it to any member or group of members at your discretion in a classified session. And I know, and I am certain, President Trump did not intend on attacking the Chinese, and it is my directed responsibility by the Secretary of Defense to convey that intent. My task at that time was to de-escalate. My message was, again, consistent. Calm, steady, de-escalate. We're not going to attack you. At Secretary of Defense Esper's direction, I made a call to General Lee on 30 October. 8 people sat in that call with me, and I read out the call within 30 minutes of the call ending. On 31 December, the Chinese requested a call with me. The Department's Deputy Assistant Secretary of Defense for Asia-Pacific Policy helped coordinate my call, which was then scheduled for 8 January. And he made a preliminary call on 6 January. 11 people attended the call with me, and readouts of this call were distributed to the interagency that same day. On 14 December, then Acting Secretary of Defense Miller had been briefed on the entire program. Shortly after my call ended with General Lee, I informed both Secretary of State Pompeo and White House Chief of Staff Meadows about the call, among several other topics. Soon after that, I attended a meeting with Acting Secretary Miller where I briefed him on the call. Later that same day, on 8 January, Speaker of the House, Nancy Pelosi, called me to inquire about the President's ability to launch nuclear weapons. I sought to assure her that nuclear launch is governed by a very specific and deliberate process. She was concerned and made various personal references characterizing the President. I explained to her that the President is the sole nuclear launch authority, but he doesn't launch them alone, and that I am not qualified to determine the mental health of the President of the United States. There are processes, protocols, and procedures in place, and I repeatedly assured her there is no chance of an illegal, unauthorized, or accidental launch of nuclear weapons. The Presidential Directive and SecDef directives, the Chairman is part of this process to ensure that the President is fully informed when determining the use of the world's deadliest weapons. By law, I am not in the chain of command, and I know that. However, by Presidential Directive and Department of Defense instruction, signed by the President and Secretaries of Defense, I am in the chain of communication to fulfill my legal statutory role as the President's primary military advisor. After the Speaker Pelosi call, I convened a short meeting in my office with key members of my staff to refresh all of us on these procedures, which we practice 3 times a day at the action officer level. Additionally, I immediately informed Acting Secretary of Defense Miller of her call. At no time was I attempting to change or influence the process, usurp authority, or insert myself into the chain of command. But I am expected to give my advice and ensure the President is fully informed on military affairs. I am submitting for the record, and I believe you have it, a couple of memorandums for record, in addition to detailed timelines, and I am happy to discuss in further detail in either classified or unclassified sessions with any or all of you about my actions surrounding these events. I welcome a thorough walkthrough. I'll be happy to provide whatever documents, phone logs, emails, memoranda, witnesses, or anything else you want that'll help you understand these events. My oath is to support the Constitution of the United States of America against all enemies, foreign and domestic, and I will never turn my back on that oath. I firmly believe in civilian control of the military as a bedrock principle and essential to the health of this republic, and I'm committed to ensuring the military stays clear of domestic politics. Thank you, Chairman, for the extra time, and I look forward to your questions.
Thank you. Excuse me. General McKenzie.
Chairman Smith, Ranking Member Rogers, distinguished members of the committee, thanks for the opportunity to testify about